Blood pooled beneath Cordelia's torn dress as she pressed her palm against the wagon wheel, each breath sending lightning through her shattered ribs. The Comanche war party had vanished into the desert heat, leaving behind only smoke, screams, and the acrid stench of gunpowder hanging over what remained of the Whitmore settlement. "No more pain, my ribs are broken," she whispered to the merciless sun, her vision blurring as dust settled on her copper hair. The wooden spokes dug into her spine, but moving meant agony beyond endurance. A shadow fell across her face. Through swollen eyes, she glimpsed buckskin leggings and moccasins that made no sound on the blood-soaked earth. Her heart hammered against her damaged ribs as a weathered hand reached toward her throat. Instead of the killing blow she expected, gentle fingers pressed against her pulse. The Apache warrior knelt beside her, his coal-black hair streaked with silver, his face bearing the deep lines of a man who'd seen too many battles. He spoke words she couldn't understand, but his tone carried something she hadn't heard in hours. Compassion.Kestrel had been tracking the Comanche raiders for 3 days when he discovered the massacred settlement. White settlers meant trouble, usually, but this broken woman bleeding into the dust stirred something long buried in his chest. Her green eyes held no hatred, only pain and a fierce will to survive that reminded him of a wounded hawk he'd once nursed back to health. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms. She cried out, her body going rigid against his chest, but didn't fight him. Blood seeped through his buckskin shirt as he carried her toward his horse, her breath coming in shallow gasps against his neck. "She," he murmured in Apache, then switched to the broken English he'd learned from traders. "I help, no hurt." Cordelia's world narrowed to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat and the surprising gentleness of his grip. This wasn't how she'd imagined. Dying cradled against an Apache warrior's chest while he whispered foreign words that somehow soothed her terror. When consciousness finally slipped away, her last thought was of his eyes, dark as midnight, but holding depths of kindness she'd never expected to find. Kestrel secured her limp form against his saddle and guided his horse toward the hidden canyon, where his people made their winter camp. The elders would question his decision to bring a white woman among them, but he'd faced their disapproval before. Something about this fragile, fierce creature called to his warrior's soul. The desert. Wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain as they rode deeper into Apache territory, leaving behind the smoking ruins of her old life and heading toward an uncertain future that would bind their hearts together in ways neither could imagine. Firelight danced across the medicine lodge's buffalo-hide walls as Cordelia drifted between waking and fevered dreams. Days blurred together in a haze of healing herbs and gentle hands that cleaned her wounds without causing unnecessary pain. The Apache women who tended her spoke in soft musical tones, their touch infinitely more careful than any doctor's back in Boston. Kestrel appeared like a ghost each evening, checking her progress with the quiet intensity of a man accustomed to protecting what mattered to him. He brought gifts, water sweetened with wild honey, strips of perfectly cooked venison, and once a handful of desert wildflowers that filled the lodge with unexpected beauty. "Why?" she managed to ask him on the 7th night, when the crushing weight in her chest had finally eased enough for full sentences. "Why save me?" He settled cross-legged beside her sleeping furs, his presence both foreign and oddly comforting. In the firelight, his weathered features softened, revealing glimpses of the younger man he'd once been. "You fight like warrior," he said, his English improving with each conversation. "When Comanche come, you no run, you stand. You protect children." Until ... He gestured toward her bandaged ribs. Until no more could do. Cordelia's throat tightened. She remembered now. Little Mercy Whitmore crying behind the overturned table, the war axe descending toward the child's golden head. She'd thrown herself between them without thinking, taking the blow meant for an innocent. The children? Kestrel's expression darkened. Gone, taken. But you have warrior heart. Such spirit should not die in dust. As her strength returned, Cordelia began to observe the intricate rhythms of Apache life. Women gathered pine nuts and ground corn while singing ancient songs. Men crafted weapons with the precision of master artists. Children played games that taught them survival skills disguised as fun. It was nothing like the rigid, suffocating society she'd known back east. Kestrel became her window into this world, teaching her Apache words and explaining customs with infinite patience. When she struggled to pronounce shash for bear, he laughed, a rich, warm sound that made her heart skip in ways she didn't dare examine too closely. You say like angry mountain cat, he teased, demonstrating the proper tongue placement. Try again. Their lessons extended beyond language. He showed her which plants healed and which killed, how to read weather signs and cloud formations, how to move silently through brush that would betray a white person's presence with every step. Under his tutelage, Cordelia discovered strengths she'd never known she possessed, but it was the evenings she treasured most, when Kestrel would tell stories of his people's history while she mended torn clothing or helped prepare meals. His deep voice painted pictures of legendary warriors and wise women, of spirits that dwelt in mountains and rivers, of a way of life that honored both strength and mercy. One night, as autumn painted the canyon walls in shades of fire, Cordelia realized she no longer thought of herself as a captive. Somewhere between her first tentative steps and her first successful attempt at starting a fire Apache style, this place had begun to feel like home. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it filled her with a quiet joy she'd never experienced in all her 23 years of civilized living. Winter arrived early in the canyon, bringing with it a closeness that made Cordelia's pulse quicken whenever Kestrel entered the shared lodge where she now helped care for his elderly mother. Singing Crow, the old woman had accepted her with surprising warmth, teaching her to weave baskets and prepare traditional foods while sharing stories that revealed her son's true character. He bring you because Great Spirit whisper in his heart, Singing Crow explained one evening as they worked by firelight. Long time he walk alone path. Now maybe find someone walk beside him. Cordelia's hands stilled on the willow strip she was weaving. I'm not Apache. Apache not born in blood only. Apache born in spirit. The elder's knowing eyes crinkled with gentle humor. Your spirit sings same song as his. Even blind woman could see. The truth hit Cordelia like a physical blow. Somewhere between learning to tan hides and mastering the art of silent hunting, she'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with the man who'd saved her life. But loving him and being worthy of him felt like separate battles entirely. That night, Kestrel found her sitting outside the lodge, gazing at stars that seemed close enough to touch in the thin mountain air. Without invitation, he settled beside her, close enough that she could smell the sage smoke that clung to his hair. You trouble in heart, he observed, not asking but stating with the directness she'd come to expect from him. Your world is beautiful. She said carefully, your people have shown me kindness I didn't deserve, but I don't belong here. You belong where your spirit find peace. He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes reflecting starlight. Where you find peace, Cordelia, who fights like warrior? The Apache name he'd given her, Dust, meaning she who stands strong, had gradually replaced her birth name in daily conversation. Hearing her white name on his lips felt strange now, like putting on clothes that no longer fit. I find peace with you, she whispered, the admission torn from her heart before fear could stop it. Kestrel's intake of breath was barely audible, but she felt the tension that suddenly coiled through his powerful frame. For a moment that stretched like eternity, neither spoke. Then his calloused hand cupped her face with infinite tenderness. White. World say Apache savage. Apache world say white woman weak. Both wrong, but... He traced her cheekbone with his thumb, his touch igniting fires under her skin. Path we walk together be hard, very hard. I know. She leaned into his touch, her heart hammering against her ribs. I know what I'm choosing, what I'm giving up, but I also know what I'm gaining. When his lips finally met hers, the kiss held all the passion and promise of two souls recognizing their perfect match. It was nothing like the hesitant, proper kisses she'd received from Boston suitors. This was fire and strength and the wild freedom of loving without reservation that they broke apart breathless, foreheads pressed together under the vast Arizona sky. My mother say Great Spirit whisper to my heart, Kestrel murmured against her lips. She right. But whisper say more than bring you to safety. Whisper say you bring me to life. Spring's arrival brought more than wildflowers to the canyon. It brought soldiers blue uniformed, men who rode with the rigid purpose of those convinced they were bringing civilization to a savage land. Cordelia watched from the ridge as Kestrel met with the Apache Council, his face grave as he translated the ultimatum delivered by the cavalry patrol. Government say all Apache go to reservation, he told her that evening, his usually steady voice tight with suppressed fury. Leave homeland. Leave sacred places. Live like prisoners on white man's land. Cordelia's blood chilled. She'd heard about the reservations back east, places where proud nations withered and died, stripped of everything that made them who they were. The thought of watching Kestrel's spirit slowly crushed behind the boundaries of such a place made her physically sick. What will your people do? Some say fight, some say go. Always lead to sorrow. He stared into the fire, flames reflecting in his dark eyes. But now I have other worry. What do you mean? Kestrel turned to face her fully, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Soldiers ask about white woman. Say maybe captive held against will. Say come back tomorrow for answer. The words hit her like arrows to the chest, of course. The outside world would never believe she'd chosen this life freely. To them, she could only be a victim in need of rescue. I won't go. The words came out fierce and final. They can't make me. They can. His voice held the weight of someone who understood exactly how much power the government wielded. If you there when they return, they take you. Maybe bring more soldiers. Maybe. He didn't finish the sentence, but she understood. Her presence could bring disaster to the people who'd become her family. That night, they lay together in the lodge they now shared, her head on his chest as his fingers traced patterns in her hair. Neither slept. When dawn began to pale the eastern sky, Cordelia felt as if she were watching her heart break with the sunrise. There might be a way, she said suddenly, the idea forming even as she spoke. The soldiers don't know what I look like. They're hunting for a white woman named Cordelia Whitmore. But that woman died in the massacre. Kestrel went still beneath her. What you mean? I mean, maybe it's time for Dahas to completely replace Cordelia. She sat up, her green eyes bright with desperate hope. Your people know plants that can darken skin, don't they? Ways to change how someone looks? You want become Apache? Truly Apache? His voice held wonder and something deeper, a hope he was afraid to voice. I want to become your wife. I want to bear your children and grow old in this canyon and be buried beside you when our time comes. She cupped his face in her hands, memorizing every line and angle. If that means letting Cordelia Whitmore disappear forever, then that's what it means. When the soldiers returned that afternoon, they found only Apaches in the canyon. The wise woman who served as translator shook her head sadly when asked about a white captive. No such woman lived among them, she explained. Perhaps the soldiers had been given false information hidden in plain sight. Her skin darkened with walnut dye and her hair braided with turquoise beads. Dahest watched her former life ride away without a backward glance. The transformation wasn't perfect, wouldn't fool close inspection, but from a distance, she was simply another Apache woman going about her daily tasks. That evening, Kestrel led her to the sacred spring where his people performed their most solemn ceremonies. Under stars that had witnessed countless generations of love and loss, they spoke vows in Apache and sealed them with rings carved from native silver. The white woman was gone. In her place stood a warrior's wife, ready to face whatever future awaited them together. The reservation ultimatum sparked the bloodiest summer of Kestrel's life. As war parties formed and dissolved like smoke, he found himself torn between his duty as a warrior and his need to protect the woman who'd become his heart's center. Dost bore their separation with the stoic grace he'd come to expect from her, but he saw how her hands lingered on her still flat belly during their brief reunions. How long? He asked one moonlit night when he'd stolen back to the canyon. Between raids. 3 moons, maybe 4. Her smile held equal measures of joy and terror. Your mother says the baby grows strong. A child. Their child. The news should have filled him with unqualified happiness, but instead it weighted his shoulders with new responsibility. How could he raise a son or daughter in a world that was disappearing piece by bloody piece? The next morning brought devastating news. Colonel Morrison's forces had surrounded 3 Apache bands near Skeleton Canyon, demanding immediate surrender. Among the trapped were Singing Crow and a dozen other elders who'd refused to flee their ancestral home. I go with you, Dahest said when Kestrel began preparing his weapons. No, too dangerous now. You stay safe. Her green eyes flashed with familiar fire. I didn't transform myself and abandon my old life to sit helplessly while my family faces death. I'm going. They argued fiercely, but Kestrel knew that stubborn set of her jaw. She would follow with or without his permission, and at least together he could protect her. Against his better judgment, he relented. The rescue attempt went wrong. From the first moment, Morrison had anticipated an Apache counterattack and positioned his men accordingly. What should have been a swift strike became a running battle across impossible terrain, with soldiers and warriors dying under the merciless desert sun. Dost proved her worth a dozen times over, moving through the chaos with deadly precision. Her marksmanship learned during childhood. Hunting trips with her father served them well as she picked off soldiers from concealed positions. But when a bullet creased her shoulder, sending her tumbling down a rocky slope, Kestrel's world narrowed to her pained cry. He reached her just as Colonel Morrison himself emerged from behind a boulder, pistol trained on her heart. Well, the famous Apache scout and his white squaw. Morrison's smile held no warmth. Did you really think that walnut stain would fool a man who's been fighting Indians for 20 years? Kestrel's hand froze on his rifle. One wrong move, and both Dahest and their unborn child would die. She's no concern of yours, he said carefully. Oh, but she is. Cordelia Whitmore, daughter of Judge Whitmore back in Boston. Her family's offered quite a reward for her safe return. Morrison's gun never wavered. They'll be so relieved to learn she survived the massacre. My name is Dahest, she said quietly, struggling to sit upright despite the blood seeping from her shoulder. Cordelia Whitmore died with the rest of the settlers. We'll see what a few months on the reservation does to change your mind about that. The shot came from an unexpected direction, Singing Crow's ancient rifle speaking with deadly accuracy. Morrison dropped like a stone, his blood seeping into sand that had drunk too much already. Grandmother, Kestrel breathed as the old woman emerged from the rocks like a vengeful spirit. You think old woman cannot fight for family? Singing Crow's eyes sparkled with fierce pride. Help, daughter of my heart. We have long way to go. They reached the hidden canyon as the sun set behind the western mountains. The wound in Daha's shoulder was clean but deep, and the stress of the day had awakened cramping pains in her abdomen that terrified them both. As Singing Crow worked to stop the bleeding, Kestrel held his wife's hand and whispered every prayer. He knew to every spirit that might listen. They'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. Winter brought an uneasy peace to the canyon, but also the growing certainty that their hidden sanctuary couldn't remain secret much longer. Government surveyors had been spotted in the area, and Mexican traders brought disturbing news. More troops were coming, along with Indian agents determined to account for every Apache not yet confined to the reservations. Dast's pregnancy had progressed beautifully despite the trauma of the previous summer. Her belly now curved proudly beneath her buckskin dress, and the baby's movements had grown strong enough to wake Kestrel from sleep when tiny feet drummed against his back during the night. "She will be fierce like her mother," he murmured one evening, his hand spread across the taut skin of her abdomen. "She?" Dahist laughed, the sound echoing warmly in their lodge. "Your mother insists it's a boy. Says he sits too low to be a girl. My mother knows many things. But I know my daughter already fights in the womb. See?" He pressed gently, and the baby responded with an indignant kick that made them both smile. Their peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of running feet. Wind Walker, the young warrior who served as their scout, burst through the lodge flap with news that turned Kestrel's blood to ice. "Soldiers come. Many soldiers. With Gatling gun and howitzer. Also Indian agent and—" He paused, swallowing hard. "White woman. Woman who knows captive names." Dahast went pale. "Someone who knew the settlers?" "Must be. They camp 5 miles south. Come at sunrise." Windwalker looked between them with desperate eyes. "Chief says, we run now. Leave everything. Go deep mountains." But running wasn't an option for a woman heavy with child. Dahist couldn't make such a journey, and even if she could, the baby might come at any moment. They were trapped. "There is another way," Singing Crow said quietly from the lodge entrance. "Dangerous way. But maybe only way." She outlined her plan with the tactical precision of someone who'd survived 70 winters by thinking 3 moves ahead of her enemies. It was audacious, risky beyond measure, and their only real hope at dawn. The soldiers found the canyon apparently deserted except for one old Apache woman sitting peacefully beside a small fire. Singing Crow greeted them with the dignity of someone who'd never bowed to any authority but her own conscience. The Indian agent, a thin man named Forsyth, questioned her through an interpreter while soldiers searched the abandoned lodges. Where? Had everyone gone? When had they left? Were there any white captives among them? To every question, Singing Crow gave the same answer. The people had gone to join their relatives in Mexico. She was too old for such a journey and had stayed to die in the place of her birth. As for white captives, she'd never seen any. While this performance played out in the main camp, Kestrel and Dahist waited in the hidden cave system that honeycombed the canyon walls. They'd discovered the chambers during their first year together, but never imagined they'd need them as a refuge. Plan was simple: remain hidden until the soldiers left, then flee to the Mexican stronghold where Geronimo's band still held out. But as Dahist's labor pains began in earnest, simple became impossible. "Baby comes now," she whispered, gripping his hand with desperate strength. "Can't wait." Outside their cave, they could hear soldiers moving about, their voices echoing off stone walls as they searched for signs of recent habitation. Any sound a cry of pain, a baby's first wail, would bring death crashing down on all of them. Kestrel pressed his face against his wife's hair and prayed to every ancestor who'd ever faced impossible odds. Their child was about to be born in a cave, surrounded by enemies, with only whispered words of love to welcome them into a world that would deny their very right to exist. But as Dost bit down on her leather belt to muffle her cries, as her body fought to bring their baby into the light, Kestrel realized something profound. This child would be born free. Whatever else happened, their son or daughter would draw their first breath in Apache territory, under Apache protection, claimed by Apache love. That was worth any risk. The baby's cry came soft as a bird's whisper, muffled immediately by Dost's gentle hand. In the amber glow of the single candle they dared to light, Kestrel gazed down at his daughter's perfect face and felt his warrior's heart crack open with wonder. "She's beautiful," Dahest breathed, exhaustion and joy warring in her voice. "Look at all that black hair." Indeed, their daughter bore no trace of her mother's European heritage. She was purely Apache in appearance, from her dark eyes to her bronzed skin. The gods had given them an unexpected gift, a child who could live openly among her father's people without question. Above them, boots echoed on stone as the search continued. They'd been hiding for 18 hours now, and Forsyth's patience was clearly wearing thin. Through gaps in the rock, they could hear him berating his soldiers for their failure to find any trace of the missing Apaches. "Someone's helping them," the agent snarled. "Indians don't just vanish into thin air. Search every crevice, every shadow. I want answers." A soldier's voice drifted down. "Sir, maybe the old woman's telling the truth. Maybe they really did go to Mexico." "Nonsense. The Whitmore girl is here somewhere. I can feel it." Daha's face went white at the mention of her former name. They'd come so far, built such a perfect life, but the past refused to stay buried. She clutched their daughter closer, as if love alone could shield the baby from the hatred of the outside world. Kestrel made a decision that surprised even him. Rising silently, he pressed a tender kiss to both his wife's and daughter's foreheads. "What are you doing?" Dahest whispered in alarm. "Ending this. They want Apache warrior to fight. I give them what they want." He checked his weapons with practiced efficiency. "You stay hidden. When shooting stops, you know which way it goes." "No." Her grip on his arm was fierce despite her exhaustion. "We face this together. All of us, as a family." Before he could protest, she was struggling to her feet, their hours-old daughter cradled securely in her arms. The determined set of her jaw told him argument would be futile. They'd walk this path together from the beginning. They would see it through to whatever end awaited. They emerged from the cave system to find the soldiers gathered around Singing Crow, who sat exactly as they'd left her. The old woman's eyes flickered to them briefly, but her expression revealed nothing. "Colonel Forsyth," Dahest called out, her voice carrying clearly across the canyon. "I believe you're looking for me." The transformation that swept over the soldiers was immediate and electric. Rifles swung toward them as men who'd been conducting a routine sweep suddenly found themselves facing their primary objective. Forsyth himself went rigid with triumph. "Miss Cordelia Whitmore, your family will be so relieved." His smile held no warmth, "though I suspect you've been changed by your captivity." "My captivity ended 2 years ago," Dahest replied calmly. "What you see now is my choice. Choices can be undone, especially when they involve consorting with hostiles." Kestrel stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of his wife and child. "She is Apache now. Wife to me, mother to my daughter. Your law has no claim on her. Apache law doesn't supersede American law, warrior. The woman comes with us. The woman stays with her family." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. 30 soldiers faced one Apache warrior, but Kestrel's reputation as a fighter was legendary. Several men shifted nervously, clearly reluctant to test their luck against someone who'd earned his fearsome Name in single combat. Then Singing Crow rose slowly to her feet, every eye tracking her movement. When she spoke, her words carried the authority of someone who'd negotiated treaties and witnessed the rise and fall of nations. Agent Forsyth. You see Apache woman with Apache baby and Apache husband. You see Apache grandmother who would die before letting harm come to family. What you do not see is white woman who needs rescue. She gestured toward Dahist with regal dignity. Your eyes deceive you. Better you go now, before winter storms make travel dangerous. Forsyth's jaw tightened. He'd come too far, risked too much, to leave empty-handed. But as he looked around the canyon at the ancient petroglyphs that marked this as sacred ground, at the small family that stood ready to fight to the death for their right to exist, at the old woman whose eyes held depths of wisdom, he couldn't begin to fathom. Something shifted in his expression. Search complete, he said finally, his voice flat. No white captives found. We're moving out. As the soldiers prepared to leave, Forsyth paused beside his horse and looked back at them one last time. If anyone asks, I saw 3 Apaches, and nothing more. But know this, others will come. Others who won't be so easily convinced. He mounted and rode out without another word, leading his men toward the canyon mouth and the wider world beyond. As the sound of hoofbeats faded into distance, Kestrel felt a tension he'd carried for months finally begin to ease. They were safe. Not permanently. Forsyth's warning had been genuine, but for now, for this perfect moment, they were free to love each other without fear. What do we name her? Dahist asked, gazing down at their daughter's peaceful face. Kestrel considered, watching the morning sun paint the canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson. This child had been born in a cave, surrounded by enemies, protected by nothing but love and the fierce determination of her family to survive. She was a bridge between 2 worlds, carrying the best of both in her tiny hands. Ayana, he said softly, eternal blossom. Because our love bloomed in the desert, and nothing will ever make it wither. As if she understood, baby Ayana opened her dark eyes and looked directly at her father. In that gaze, Kestrel saw not just his own features reflected back, but the promise of a future where love could transcend any boundary, overcome any obstacle, and create new possibilities from the ashes of old conflicts. The Apache warrior, the transformed woman, and their perfect daughter stood together in the golden morning light, victorious against all odds and ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. They had each other, they had their love, and in the end, that was more than enough. The pain was gone. The ribs had healed. And in taking her in, the Apache had given Dahist not just a new life, but the deepest, truest happiness she'd ever known.